Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to take a look at the Many Pyroars of GLC. So what is GLC? For those of you who don't know, it's a single prize only no Robux format. It is singleton, of course, except for basic energy, and you're only allowed one type per deck, which doesn't complicate anything for this video because all your Pyroars are going to be fire types. So yeah, quite straightforward. And sadly, the first Pyroar here is, it's not great, but we're not, don't worry, we're not going to look at bad Pyroars for like the rest of the video. There is actually some good ones here, but yeah, this is arguably the worst Pyroar in GLC by a long way, so like we don't need to spend too long on this. Crunch, flip a coin of heads, discard energy, like there's just way better attacks in GLC. Royal Flare does 120 and you have to discard 2 energy, but it costs 4, so you know, it's a bit painful. If it had been for 3, then maybe it would have been okay, but not for 4. It's just way too expensive. But yeah, it is a promo at the end of the day, so it's not that accessible anyways. So it's unlikely that you would start your GLC journey with this one in your collection. But yeah, cannot recommend this Pyro whatsoever. But yeah. Moving on swiftly, we can get to the next one, which is going to be the one from Flashfire. And this one's honestly really strong. Has the ability Intimidating Main that says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon. And then Scorching Fang for a fire double colors does 60. And you may discard a Fire Energy attached to Pyro, and if you do, this attack does 30 more damage. So the attack is obviously not great, but you can still threaten to hit kills on some Pokemon, provided you can recycle the energy, which you can do fairly easily in Fire decks, really, with stuff like Fire Crystal and Magma Basin. But of course, the main appeal with this Pyro is going to be that ability. Like, it's just evil. So it switches off a lot of basic attackers like Wishy-Washy and Guzzlord. Funny enough, this guy is pretty good against Guzzlord because Scorching Fang, you can sit there, do 60, and then next turn just discard energy to do the 150. So yeah, it's quite nice. You got some turret kills on Guzzlord. But yeah, overall, I would definitely say this is definitely one of the stronger Pyros in GLC for sure. Just a very strong card overall. Then we got the one from XY Phantom Forces, and this one does have a pretty fun ability. This card also appears in a theme deck from the same era, Phantom Forces. So, if you're interested in picking up that theme deck for whatever reason, then you would get this Pyro, but it's probably cheaper to buy as a single. But yeah, it has the ability Flare Command. It says once your turn, you may discard a Fire Energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with his or her active Pokemon. And then the attack is pretty subpar, 4 energy, 110, 30 to itself, pretty bad. But the ability is fairly strong, and a very similar ability does exist for fire types in this Ninetales, which has the ability Nine Temptations, which says once your turn, you may discard 2 fire energy cards from your hand. If you do, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. So really, the fun thing here is that if there happens to be a Ninetales that you really want to play as, like an attacker, for example, and you don't want to have to use this ability, you could run this Pyro and then an attacking Ninetales, and the same works vice versa. So if there's a different Pyro that you want to run in GLC, then you could run this Ninetales instead. So it's kind of nice that there is actually 2 Pokemon for a change that do have a very similar ability. But yeah, the key difference, of course, is that you do need the energy actually attached to Pyro, but thankfully, you can get it back with stuff like Magma Basin, so it's not really the end of the world. But if you want to recycle that energy and get it back, then Magma Basin is probably the best way of doing it consistently. But yeah, kind of an easier ability to use, to be honest, compared to Ninetales. But you'll have to, of course, dedicate some manual attachments if you want to use this ability. But yeah, seems fairly strong, to be honest, and not a bad card at all. But then we get to Steam Siege, and this one's, I would say, a bit worse than the ones we've looked at previously. I've got the attack Flame Charge, does 60, and you can search your deck for Fire Energy and attach it to this Pyroar. And then Incinerate for 2 Fire Colors does 90, and before doing damage, you get to discard all Pokemon 2 cards attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, which is quite nice sometimes. There's some Pokemon with good tools. However, Incinerate doing 90, it's pretty subpar. But at the end of the day, if you can get this going like turn 2, then doing 60 is okay. It's not really as good as it once was, just because of the sheer volume of basic Pokemon with 70 HP or more, really. But, Flame Charge, still not the worst thing in the world, and it will attach the energy. So at least you're not spending yet another manual attachment to do Incinerate, if that makes sense. You can just do the 60 and then always follow up with Incinerate the next turn. So that's kind of nice. That's a plus side at the very least. One reason to run this card, I guess, but there is definitely better attackers in fire decks, but, not the worst thing I've ever seen, plus the artwork looks amazing. So yeah, kind of a plus side, to be honest. Definitely not the worst Pyroar, really. But we have this Pyro from Forbidden Light, and I do kind of like this card actually. It's got some nice synergy with Lysander stuff. Has the ability of Nerve. Whenever your opponent plays an item or sport card from their hand to prevent all effects of that card done to Pyroar, which is really nice because it shuts down Crushing Hammer, which is very annoying. But stuff like that would also stop things like Counter Catcher as well, Pokemon Catcher. So yeah, quite a nice effect. And then the attack for a Fire Double Colors, Dominating Fangs, does 80 damage. However, if Lysander Lab's in play, you do 60 more, so 140. Now, the stadium itself says Pokemon tool cards in play have no effect, which, to be honest, can be a bit of a disrespect to your own deck because, you are turning off tools that could modify this damage or give Pyroar more HP, or, just tool cards attached to your other Pokemon. This does shut down pivots and things like that, which is annoying. However, because of the Stadium War situation in GLC, where there being so many playable stadiums, as well as stuff like Field Blower existing, I would definitely say that, Lysander Labs is probably not going to stick around forever. Plus, Pyroar is only 120 HP Pokemon, so you're probably not going to get too many uses out of this. But, I would say it's in that weird spot where it's consistent enough to be pulled off easy, but it's also not going to stick around forever. So, you got some choice here. Do you want to take the risk and try and find Lysander Labs and set up for Dominating Fangs, or would you rather just play a Pyro that's a bit easier to play? But, if you don't think you're going to be running many tool cards in your GLC deck, and maybe your tools are kind of subpar, I guess, you're not running stuff like Floatstone, then maybe this Pyro is pretty decent. But yeah, don't think 140 is terrible damage, really, for 3 energy. So, yeah, seems pretty okay, to be honest. Then we have a one from Lost Thunder, and this one has the crime of just being a bit boring. It's a bit bland. It's better than the first Pyroar we looked at in this video, but Crunch does 30 damage for 2 colors, and you get to discard energy from your opponent's active Pokemon, which is okay. You can combo this with a variety of energy removal, but aside from that, it's just like not very impressive. I guess you could combo this with stuff like double colors energy to make it a bit easier to pay for, which is nice, but aside from that, really, and aside from being like the only artwork in the game, really, where Pyroar has its main pullback, aside from that, it's not very impressive, really. It's a bit of a shame, but yeah, that is the Pyroar from Lost Thunder. Then we have a Pyroar from Cosmic Eclipse, and it has the attack Swirling Inferno, which is a very volatile attack. For 2 Fire and colorless, only does 70 damage, but you get to discard all Pokemon tool cards and special energy from each of your opponent's Pokemon. So, a very, very strong attack against Porygon decks most of the time, and very strong against Tool Drop if anyone happens to be playing Tool Drop in GLC. I'm not really seeing any Tool Drop lists kicking around, but I'm sure there will be one or two. But yeah, it's a very niche card, and most of the time this thing isn't doing a lot of damage. I mean, Heat Blast is the most base damage I think a Pyro does in GLC, which is kind of cool. But aside from that, really, I guess it's here for you manually attach energy, you welder the other two, you do Swirling Inferno, and then for the rest of the game, you're just doing Heat Blast, assuming you survive. But it's a lot of resources just to do a very niche thing, so not really sure it's worth it. It's a pretty niche Pyro, really, at the end of the day. Then we have a one from Evolving Skies. This one has the attack Ripclaw, which does 70 damage, and you get to discard energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So very, very similar to the one from Lost Thunder. But I guess the key difference here is this does cost a Fire Colorless. So you will have to either do 2 manual attachments, or you'll have to use Welder. Like, you can't just use double Colorless. But aside from that, I would definitely say 70 is a massive step up from 30 these days. It's still not going to turret kill like every stage 2 Pokemon or whatever, but still pretty good at the end of the day. Then we move on to Lost Origin, and this one has the strong ability Scorching Aura. It says, during Pokemon checkup, put 4 damage counters on your opponent's burnt Pokemon instead of 2, which has lovely synergy with stuff like Macargo and Scorch, which Macargo, for those of you who don't know, it's just like whenever your opponent switches out, their new active Pokemon is now burned. So going back into your turn, it would guarantee 40 damage, which is quite nice. And then the Scorch has the attack Charring Breath, which does 180, and if your opponent's active Pokemon isn't burned, this attack does nothing. So can technically stack to 220, but yeah, still a very fun card though. Definitely say this is fun for burn decks. Then we have the last one here from Paldea Evolved, has the attack Overrun, and ironically the attack Singe, which is a shame, you would want more basics, I guess, but still annoying that there's another Pyro, but with Singe. But yeah, has the attack Overrun, does 60 damage, and then 20 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. which is a bit boring, really. And 60 is not going to KO every basic, well, every evolving basic, I should say. Not going to KO every basic by a long way, but yeah. It's a bit weak. Sadly, one thing well, I guess it's not a sad thing, but like the one thing I will say about this card is the art rare is lovely from the same set. But aside from that, I would definitely say this card is pretty subpar, especially compared to like all the interesting ones that we've seen before. Like even this one's a bit more interesting. Like this one was kind of cool. This one's like whatever, but this one was fun. This one's kind of alright. This one was very fun. This one's playable. So there's been like a lot of interesting Pyroars, and then there's just this from the Scarlet and Violet era. Would have liked them to do something a bit more with this Pyroar, basically. But yeah, that's the last Pyroar. But yeah, thank you for watching. I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, so subscribe if you're interested in being updated. This is now a series to stay, so let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see. There is a list, but getting through them, and a playlist has been made. Hint, hint, got like Articuno and Heatran still to do, but they might be up before this video is released. But if you want to dive into the competitive side, Omnipoke and the format creator Tricky Gym have both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. But yeah, this has been Power. Will you be playing Pyroar in your GLC Fire deck, I guess? And yeah, thank you for watching.